Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones. And if you've been following this series with Ducks in Calgary, you have to be super happy, Ducks fans. The Anaheim Ducks are up 3-0 in this series, Eddie. They're looking to close it out in Game 4. The series, began in Anaheim, Game 1. And the Ducks took out the Flames in the first game, 3-2, and actually in the second game, 3-2. But in the first game, the Ducks came out pretty strong, Eddie, in this series. They looked good. Ryan Getzlaf scoring on the power play early. The Flames did battle back, kind of took the momentum back in the second period, but the Ducks responded, and they ended up winning this one and building a 1-0 lead in the series to start off.
Yeah, it was a well-fought game. I think both teams came out pretty good. Obviously, the Ducks getting that early power play goal, and really both power plays have been on fire. I think they're the two best power plays, or two of the best power plays in the playoffs right now. And yeah, I mean the Ducks grabbed two in this game. Getzlaf grabbed the first one, and Silfverberg grabbed the last goal, the game-winning goal on the power play. So, I think it was a good game. I mean, the streak stays alive. The Ducks, the Flames can't seem to win at Honda Center, and it extends into the playoffs too. So, yeah, I think it was a good game. 41 shots. They tested Elliott. They dominated in the faceoff dot, which is something we knew they would most likely do against the Flames. And I think it was all around a good effort for them. They played physical, they blocked shots, limited their turnovers, and I think it was a good start to the playoffs.
Yeah, this game kind of was a seesaw battle. I mean, the Ducks started out, pretty strong in the first 10, minutes or so, and then Calgary responded. And, one big key here in this game, Eddie, was the poor line change by Calgary in the second period that, Bieksa spotted it, got the puck up the ice, and the Ducks broke in on, the all-too-common 3-on-0 rush, and looked like Getzlaf was going to, try to score. His shot got blocked, but Raquel was there. And to me, if you look at this game, that really was the turning point. Calgary seemed to have the momentum, almost halfway through the game. They had gotten a 2-1 lead after, going down 1-0. And I think that really turned it around, because once Raquel scored that goal and then Silfverberg scored that goal, you felt like the Ducks had the momentum. And then, of course, they just played shutdown defense in the third to take this game.
Yeah, and really this whole series has been about momentum shifts. I mean, we've seen at different times that there's really been no time during the game where both teams have just been going back and forth. It really just shifts from one team to the other, and we saw in this game, like you said, the Ducks started out really early, got the goal for Getzlaf, played really well early, and then Calgary took over for the end of the first into the early part of the second, and then right after the Raquel goal, the Ducks dominated and they played shutdown defense for the rest of the third period, and especially after the Silfverberg goal when they had the lead, and then with Kessler as well. It's great that you can throw guys like Kessler, guys like Vermette, even Thompson out there too, and win those key faceoffs. And we saw it in Game 1, and it's becoming a trend through Games 2 and 3 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has been momentum shifts. And, Game 2 was just kind of like Game 1 as far as that momentum. The Ducks, they came out in this one, and again, they scored first right away. Silfverberg scoring, and then Raquel scoring. And, the Ducks built a 2-0 lead in this game. You felt good, but then, late in the first period, Flames score. Second period, we see them push again, just like they did in Game 1. And, it's a 2-2 game. In the second period, and then all the way till the end, of the game, basically. I mean, Ryan Getzlaf gets that game-winning goal. He called bank on that goal for sure, as he goes for the pass, which ends up, deflecting and going in for the game winner there. But the Ducks end up pulling out this one 3-2, just like the first game. It was almost a carbon copy. It seemed like the momentum started with the Ducks, went with the Flames, and then went back to the Ducks. So. Very interesting, but the Ducks kept the streak alive, like you talked about. They've won, in the regular season against the Flames, going all the way back to 2004. And the last time the Flames actually won a game at Honda Center, or actually the Arrowhead Pond, was back in 2006 when they played the Ducks. So it's been a long time for them to win anything, and the Ducks continue that in these first two games.
Yeah, and after seeing Getzlaf's goal to win the game, I'm starting to think that the curse is actually real. I mean, Calgary played a great game. They had a good rebound game in this one. They outshot the Ducks. They brought the faceoffs back a little bit closer than the first game. Again, their power play clicked. They grabbed a shorthanded goal, so special teams were key for them in this game. But again, the Ducks are just able to get the greasy goals, and I mean we've seen it so many times, especially in Game 3. We'll talk about it in a bit, and the goals that they got in that game. I mean, that's this team. That's the style that this team plays. It's not pretty, but they get it done and they grind out a win, and we saw it in this one as well. You know, you could see the whole play in the power play. Getzlaf was looking to make that pass, and you get a lucky bounce. I mean, when you're trying to make plays, and the Ducks were carrying the play in the end, and Dougie Hamilton takes a dumb penalty, you know, they're gonna make you pay. And yes, the Ducks got a little bit lucky in this game, but I'm sure we'll take it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as being a Ducks fan, you see a lot of these bounces go against the Ducks, or a lot of these calls go against the Ducks, which we'll talk about that in Game 3. But it just seems like it goes against the Ducks when it comes to like bounces, or especially calls that involve like kicking the puck in the net, or things like that. Don't always go Anaheim's way, but they went their way in this game. And the Ducks did well. They had to change the lineup too a little bit in this game. Eddie Ritchie came back after his 2-game suspension, which we thought was a little bit unfair. That thought it should have been maybe 1 game instead of 2. But either way, he came back into this one. Kasse sat out as a result of that. Vatanen wasn't in this game, upper body injury. And Holzer came in this one. So both of them, Holzer and Ritchie, they didn't score, do anything too crazy, but they both played solid games. And I think that's been a strong point for the Ducks too, is we've seen the ability of this team to change some players in the lineup, and they're still able to produce and play a solid game.
Yeah, the depth of this team is I mean, we've talked about it in recent years, especially when we got Perron and McGinn at the deadline, how deep that team was. But this team is almost deeper, and you can they're interchangeable. You can put guys in the lineup, they're going to make an impact. I mean, you look at Cam Fowler's injury and how detrimental that was at the beginning of the playoffs, how big of an impact he is, the minutes that he commands for the Ducks on the blue line, and we thought that was going to be a huge loss for the Ducks. And in steps Shea Theodore, who's not only filled that role but has exceeded it. He has 5 points in the first 3 games so far. He's leading the Ducks, and he's been arguably their best player. And you look at Montour as well, who stepped in and filled in for Vatanen, and Holzer as well, who came in and played well. And Bieksa stepped up his game. He has 4 assists, made a great play on Goodrow near the end of Game 3 to keep it going for the Ducks. So I mean, everybody stepped up, and that's important. Ritchie comes back in. He gets a goal in his second game. Played a really good game the other night as well, and that's what's going to move you farther in the playoffs. That's what's going to win you the cup. If you have guys all around your lineup that can step up and produce, the Ducks have it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen them turn it on the power play. They're still doing all the hits like they've been doing. In this game, they did give away the puck a little bit too much. 21 times. It's a little high. You want to, kind of see maybe half that number. So kind of a lot of giveaways there. But, overall a good performance. And like you said, well-balanced attack for the Ducks. Silverberg scores in this one. Raquel and Getzlaf. And you talk about players leading the way. I mean, Theodore's been doing it on defense, but Getzlaf's really been getting it done on the offense, especially in his first 2 games, coming out with 4 points, factoring in on, 66% of the Ducks' goals. So that's what built the Ducks lead up to 2-0. And then they went into Calgary. And the way this game started, I think most of you pretty much, didn't think the Ducks were going to win this one. Not because the Ducks were necessarily playing poorly, but, in this game, a lot of penalties called early on against the Ducks. You saw Calgary get 2 goals early, both on the power play, and they built a 2-0 lead. As you mentioned, Ritchie scored in his second game back in the playoffs and got the Ducks within 1. And, you thought, okay, they survived the first period. It wasn't so bad. And then in the second period, Calgary again scores 2 goals back-to-back, and they build a 4-1 lead. And now you're sitting here going, okay, they're getting all the power plays, and they've scored, 3 times on those power plays, out of 5. and it just looked bad all around. I mean, the penalty kill didn't look good. They ended up pulling out Gibson. They brought in Bernier. Then the Ducks, it's just crazy. The Ducks pulled this game out, Eddie. I mean, Theodore gets a late goal in the second period. They get some momentum. Silverberg almost had one after that. He had hit the post. In the third, Thompson and Theodore come through. The Ducks end up going in overtime, and then the person we talked about that hadn't done anything in the first two games, Corey Perry, he comes through with the game winner, and I mean, this is just one of the craziest come from behind wins I can remember in the playoffs. That is for the Ducks.
Yeah, and it was just an amazing game. I mean, like you said, the struggles early. Most of the power plays that Calgary got were fair. I think the Ducks had some discipline issues early on in the game. I think the only borderline one might have been the Lindholm goalie interference call. I think that one was a little bit borderline. But yeah, I mean, it is disappointing though to not get any calls back. We saw Bennett hit BX from behind. He had to leave the ice for a bit. Luckily, he came back. No penalty on that one. But Calgary did play a pretty clean game. It's just disappointing, obviously, for the Ducks to get no power plays in this game and get no help at all from the officiating. And then you see 5 on the board for Calgary, and they make them pay, and they get 3 goals. So it's disappointing in that aspect. But like you said, I mean, this is one of the most amazing comebacks I've seen the Ducks ever in regular season playoffs. I mean, it's just amazing what they're able to come back and do. And they took advantage of Brian Elliott. I mean, he looked shaky all game. He wasn't holding on to pucks. The rebounds, he just couldn't calm himself down. And we've seen that from him in the past. I mean, last year he took St. Louis really far and looked like an all-star goalie, but we've seen him early in the season with Calgary. At times he can go on a stretch where he's just not great. And we've seen that so far in this series and definitely in this game. I mean, Shea Theodore's first goal, that was awful. I mean, it hits a Calgary stick in front, but that's a save you have to have, and that really gives the Ducks momentum. And like you said, Silverberg almost made it 4-3 before the second period even ended. And then you go into the third period. Ducks get a little bit of a break with the Thompson goal. Arguably could have been a high stick call, but I think the fact that it was a goal on the ice swayed the ref's decision there. And then Theodore gets the 4-4 going. From there on, it was all Ducks. I mean, for the end of the third period, they're going into overtime. It was all Ducks. And they get a bounce again. I mean, the bounces are going their way. We saw Getzlaf in Game 2. Goes off Boma skating in. And on this one, it goes in off Michael Stone's butt and into the net. I mean, when you can fight back and scrape and win a game like that, I think it's testament to how much fight this team has in it. And we've seen it at least in the first 3 games of this series, and it's something that's going to take them really far if they can continue to do it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Eddie. And a big thing in the playoffs, I mean, it's not just, we watch the Ducks, but you watch these other games too, East Coast, West Coast, whatever. A lot of games get decided by crazy, crazy plays. The guy throws the puck in the front, it goes off a skate, like you said with Getzlaf, or and this one, as I called it, the booty bounce goal, as it goes. Perry, score on this one, but I mean, stuff like that happens, and if you're gonna win games in the playoffs, you're gonna need a little bit of luck, and the only way you achieve that is by having guys in front of the net and throwing the puck at the net. And I mean, I know it sounds basic, and I mean, there's obviously more to the game than just that, but there's times that's what you're going to have to do. You get pressured, you're in the corner, just fire it at the net. You something happens and it goes in. Like you mentioned, one of Theodore's goals was really shaky. Or you do like Perry. You go to the bench, lose your stick, you distract the other team, and then you come down and score. I mean, that was a hilarious moment in this game too. It always seems when there's some kind of play involving antics, Perry's involved. So you got to do whatever you can to win. And if it's distracting the other team's bench, whether it's intentional or not, I mean, you just got to do what you got to do. And that's what the Ducks have been able to do in these 3 games, Eddie, especially games 2 and 3, is they've gotten some opportunistic bounces. But you got to fire the puck and you got to crash the net. I mean, if you're just taking point shots or shots from bad angles, it's not always going to work out that way.
Yeah, and that, I think that's the key right there, is they're going to the net. And they're getting traffic in front of Elliott, and he's playing, he's a shaky goalie. He doesn't have confidence right now, and that's what won them this game. I mean, you look at the first goal, Theodore's second goal from the point. A lot of guys in front, Perry's in front, Thompson's in front. Nobody knew if it tipped. It ended up going straight through because Elliott couldn't see it. See Thompson's goal as well, a tip. with some screen in front, and then on Perry's goal, I mean they're crashing. I believe Silverberg was crashing in the net. It goes in off Michael Stone and in, and those are the type of plays you have to make, and those types of plays are going to win you games. We've seen it not just in this series, but in other series, like you said, and that's an important way. And this is the style the Ducks play. We've seen it for even when Boudreaux was here, we still saw it. We still see it here. It's the type of game that the core of the Ducks play. No matter who you have coaching the team, they're still going to play this physical go to the net style, and they've done it really well in these first 3 games. Now, you got to look at it too. They are a little bit lucky to be where they are, and I think we got to take that into consideration as well. They've played great through these first 3 games, but they've all been 1-goal games. They've been close games, and you got to look at moving into the next round. There's a couple of things that have to show up as well. Obviously, the penalty kill is one of them. Being able to hold on to a lead late is something they've been good at so far in the playoffs, but they've got to show up a little bit defensively. I think moving on to the next round.
Yeah, I agree, and we're going to talk about that too in a little bit. One of the things that has come up is the goalie situation, and people are talking about Gibson and Bernier and what's going on there. But before we get to that, I want to know, what is Calgary going to do, Eddie? Are they going to keep rolling with Elliott? Because to me, after what happened in Game 3, I wouldn't start Elliott. To be honest, I would go with Chad Johnson instead, because they had all the momentum in that game. They built a 4-1 lead, and they collapsed, and a big chunk of that responsibility goes to Elliott.
Yeah, and I think you got to look at it from both factors. I mean, we look at Gibson getting pulled in this game, and you can't really blame him for all the goals in this one. I think he was screened on most of them. 3 of them were power play goals. It's difficult, but then you look at Elliott. I mean, just that second goal by the Ducks that Shea Theodore scored near the end of the period, that's one you have to have. If the Ducks go into the third down 4-1, it could be over. The fact that they get one late, they grab some momentum, they move into the third period, only 2 goals down. I think that's huge, and that's one Elliott has to have. He just misses it, and like you said, I don't know if they go with him in Game 4. I think they need a change. Just like the Ducks needed to change mid-game in this one. It's not that Gibson, I think, was playing that bad. You just need to change something up, and there's not much you can change up mid-game. So put Bernier in there. He ended up playing great, and the Ducks ended up pulling out the win. And I think if you're Calgary right now, there's not much you can really change other than putting Chad Johnson in and hoping that he can get hot and move you, take it one game at a time and move you into a Game 7 or possibly into the second round. But it's going to be difficult for them. And I think they're a little bit far gone from just a goalie change being able to spur them on and make the comeback.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Ducks are going to be able to wrap this one up. But what do you think in terms of the Ducks goalie situation? Because we have a few people, Tony, Steven, they think that the Ducks should go with Bernier in Game 4. Do you think that that's a decision Carlisle should make, or do you think he comes back with Gibson to start Game 4?
No, I don't want to discredit what Bernier did. I think he came in and he really calmed things down and he played good. He didn't make any amazing saves. He played steady, and that's what the Ducks needed when they were trying to make a comeback. So I think he played great in this game, but I just think you still have to go with Gibson. I mean, realistically, we talked about this at the beginning of the playoffs and who they would start, and we said that Gibson should start because he's the most consistent guy. He's the guy that if you looked at it on paper, this is a guy who's most likely going to lead you to the Stanley Cup. I don't think he had a great game last game, but I don't think they're all his fault. Like we said too, that 3 of them were on the power play. The other one where he couldn't see anything. He had 2 Ducks and a Flame blocking out the sun in front of him. So I don't really blame him as much for the 4 goals in that last game, and I think he deserves to get the start. I think he played great in games 1 and 2, and I think he can rebound and have a strong Game 4. And if we're going to make a big push and try and win the Stanley Cup this year, I think the only guy who can do that for us is John Gibson, and that's not putting anything against Jonathan Bernier and what he's done for the Ducks. I just don't think he's the guy that can lead them to the Cup. And I think you got to go with you traded Freddie to give this guy the number 1 job. And I think if you're going to move on forward, I think he has to play in Game 4 and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you put him back in Game 4 and he starts, and unless he does terrible, I mean, you got to keep rolling with him. I mean, and when I mean terrible, I mean, it's got to have to be a situation where he gives up 3 or 4 goals, and it's not just these power play types things. It would be a game like Elliott had, basically. If Gibson had a game like that, then okay, I get it. you pull him out, you put in Bernier. Maybe you put in Bernier for a game and give Gibson a rest. But I feel the way you do. Gibson is the one that you've got to go with for now. I mean, like you said, you made the move. You got rid of Freddie. So, I mean, this is your guy. So that's what I would do. And as far as the rest of the lineup goes, I think things have been going great. We heard that Cam Fowler was skating this week. We don't know exactly when he's going to be back. They're saying that it's, hopeful it's going to be sooner than later in that 2 to 6 week time frame. I don't know if he'll come back in this series. I think that the Ducks would not do that, being up 3-0. But that's a little bit of an update there on Fowler. They also said that Vatanen was day-to-day. So we'll see if he comes in any of these last games in this series as well. Some of the other fan questions, they talk about, who's surprised you the most, either good or bad in this series. I don't really think anybody bad is not stepped it up in the series. It seems like the whole team has played very, very well. Eddie, I think maybe the biggest surprise, and maybe not necessarily the biggest, but Theodore has really stepped it up in terms of his point production with Vatanen being out and him getting a lot of playing time. So that'd be one of the ones that I would pick as far as doing well. In terms of anybody doing poorly, I don't really see anybody on this team doing poorly in these first 3 games.
Yeah, I really can't pick anyone out. I think maybe after games 1 and 2, you could have made a case for Corey Perry, but I still think he was on the scoreboard in games 1 and 2, but I think he still played a solid role in those 2 games. And then obviously he came out in this one and played great for the Ducks and grabbed 2 points in the game winner. So I really can't pick anybody who's played bad. And then, I mean, you look at who's played well. I mean, the obvious choice, like you said, is Shea Theodore. The fact that he's leading the Ducks in points, he's got 2 goals in Game 3, he had 3 assists before that, 5 points. I mean, he's a great obvious pick. I think Nate Thompson as well. That 3-point night in Game 3, that's a big guy that you don't expect to have a night like that. He steps up and plays well.
Yes.
You've got BX, who has 4 assists, made a great play in Game 3 on Johnny Goodrow. I've harped on him all season about his defensive play, and he stepped it up. And kudos for Holzer jumping in and just playing a solid game. I mean, we lose Fowler and Vatanen, and you get Holzer to step in and play great. And then Montour as well. I mean, these guys are rookies. This is his first playoffs. He's coming in. He's looked like he's been here his whole career. I mean, it's great what they've been able to do. I think it's a testament to the Ducks' youth and the maturity they have on their blue line and the leaders that they have in the dressing room. And I think, like we mentioned already, I don't think there's anybody who's really underperformed so far in this year. I think the majority of players on the team have done better than we expected.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it kind of leads into the next question, too. We have Clarissa asks, who do you think's been the most effective in the playoffs for the Ducks so far? And I'm just going to go back straight to the captain, Getzlaf. I mean, the way he stepped up in games 1 and 2 and came through in huge moments in both those games really built the series lead up to 2-0. He didn't get any points in Game 3, but still, he's been all over the place, Eddie. And I mean, for a guy to lead the team and come out and do what he's doing, really on both sides of the puck. He's shooting it more. He's always, making great passes. And he's just really shined. I think for being the captain, he's really been leading the way.
Yeah, and I think the key thing you said there is he's doing it in both ends. I mean, the first 2 games, he had 2 points in each of the games, but the plays he made in his own zone and the way he calmed down the play and settled things down and regrouped everybody, I think was excellent. I mean, he was the best player by far in the first 2 games. I think he still played a great game 3, even though he didn't get on the board. And it's just the presence that he has right now. I mean, he's the captain. He has to be doing that, and he's doing it. I mean, this is something we've come to expect of Getzlaf, and that we've wanted to see him do on a consistent basis, especially in the playoffs, because at times we've seen him and Perry disappear during the playoffs, and it's been disappointing. It's usually led to the Ducks being eliminated, and probably a Game 7. But I think the way he stepped up in this series and the way he's come to play in the playoffs this time around, I think he's setting the Ducks up for a long run. I think his play is not going to slow down. He's building up for a long one, and they know their window's tightening up, and I think that's spurring them on this run here.
Another name that hasn't been mentioned as much in this series, and Joshua brings this up. He asks about our opinion on Kessler's play this series. He said that he feels he's been good, but he's been quiet in his opinion. And I kind of figure, what do you think about that, Eddie? I mean, he's got a point in this series. He's still doing his things in the face-off. Maybe he hasn't been throwing his arms up as much and pumping his fists. He hasn't scored a goal. But what do you think? You think he's been quietly good in the series so far?
I think that whole line has been quietly good, and that's something we've kind of come to expect from them, even during the regular season. Is they don't, early on it was a surprise. They were getting on the score sheet a lot, even Cogliano and Silverberg, and they were our best line. But they're the shutdown line of this team, and they're one of the best shutdown lines in the NHL. And even when they don't get on the score sheet, yes, Kessler has 1 point, but he's getting under guys' skin. And that line is going against Monahan, Goodrow, and Ferland in this series. If the Ducks go into the second round and play Edmonton, he's going against McDavid. If they go against the Sharks, he's playing against Pavelski. I mean, that's the importance that line is to this team. I honestly don't care if they don't get on the score sheet all that often, because that's the role they play, and they do an excellent job of it. And they've done an excellent job of it in this series. Yes, Monahan has had its way with us on the power play, but 5-on-5 he hasn't gotten anything going. Neither is Johnny Goodrow, and neither is Michael Ferland on that line. And there's a reason to that, because most of the time most of the time Kessler, Silverberg, and Cogliano are out against them and doing a great job shutting them down. So I think if he's made any kind of impact in the playoffs so far, I think that's the type of impact that he's made.
Yeah, exactly. Face-offs and defense. I mean, he may not score, but I mean, it's huge having those, especially like you said, when you're going in, against the other team's top line, pretty much on a nightly basis. And obviously Calgary, went with different line changes and whatnot with home ice in Game 3. Worked for the beginning, but the Ducks adjusted on the fly, and they were able to do it. And that's something we've seen with Carl, and that's what some of the fans have asked about too, is his experience and that kind of a different style as opposed to Boudreau. And I have to agree. I mean, if you look at some of these games, we've seen, like you talked about, momentum shift here and there, and it's refreshing to see that Carlisle, he's picked up on stuff before, but as we talked about when he first came in, we were kind of concerned if he was going to just go back to the old, bread and butter, same, dump and chase, all these other things. And he really hasn't done that. He's really, he has studied the game, and these in-game or, intermission changes and things like that, I think have been huge, Eddie, especially on the road when you know that the other team is getting the matchups. You've got to do the quick line changes, or maybe you have to juggle the lines. Be smarter with the puck, not ice it as much as well, and things like that. But I mean, it's easy to say because we're up 3-0. But like you said, it's been tight games. But the way Carlisle's been going about it, it's hard to have any complaints.
Yeah, and of course the leadership is part of it in the dressing room. Getzlaf, Bieksa, Perry, Kessler, but Carlisle has to be a part of it too. When you go into, especially in Game 3, when you go into the second intermission, you're down 4-2, you just grabbed a goal. He has to be part of that voice in the locker room that gets this team ready to go into the third period and makes them believe that they can come back and win it. And it worked in game 3, and I'm sure he was a part of whatever was said in the locker room to get them going, and any kind of plays that were drawn up. And I think he's done a good job. It's a different looking team. I think it's a harder working team than we saw. It's a more resilient team than we've seen in the past with Boudreau, especially in the playoffs. It's a team that doesn't give up. They think, especially now, they think they can win any game no matter what they're down, and that's important to have, especially when you're going deeper in the playoffs and every game is tight. So I think that's going to be important, and yeah, I mean, he's a part of it, and I think it's been a great, like you said, I think it's been refreshing, like you said, so far in the playoffs to see a new kind of air around the team, an air of confidence, a team that thinks that they can come back and win any game.
Yeah, I mean, if you come back from 3 goals in the playoffs, I mean, that's just huge. I mean, coming back from 1, okay, coming back from 2, okay, but 3 is a big feat. So the momentum is in the Ducks' corner. Now the situation we have is the Ducks are up 3-0 in this series, and you got San Jose and Edmonton. If you're following that, it looked like Edmonton was dominating. Then San Jose decides to drop a bomb on Edmonton and blows them out 7-0 to tie that series up 2-2. So they got to play at least 2 more games. So with that in mind, do you prefer that the Ducks, get out the broom and sweep Calgary, or would you rather, maybe they lose one, then they can win Game 5 at home. Or what is your thought process as far as that? Because we know that the other series has got to go at least 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose one and then they were for sure gonna win a Game 5, maybe. But I don't want any seed of doubt planted in the mind of the Ducks players. I don't want Calgary to come out and win this Game 3 and get any momentum thinking that they can come back and win this. I want this to end tonight, a sweep. The Ducks can get ready, prepare, figure out, obviously find out who they're going to play in the next round, and have some rest time for the guys who are on the ice. Have some needed rest for guys like Cam Fowler, Sammy Vaughton, to get them back up in the lineup. So I think it's important that the Ducks come in, want to end it tonight, and hopefully they can. I mean, anytime you can end it in 4, it's better than ending it in 5, and giving any team a chance to get back into it. So I think that's important. Obviously, you come into the issue maybe of them not having any playing time. Come closer to the next series. Obviously, either Edmonton or San Jose, whoever makes it to the next round is going to be the fresher team. But I don't think that always comes into it. I think it's always good to get it done, get it out of the way, be ready, focus on the next round, and I think that's what the Ducks have to do tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the other part of it, too, is the Ducks getting healthy. I mean, you want Vatanen to be healthy out there on the ice. You want to, get Fowler back as well. So, given that kind of break and nobody else getting hurt along the way, too. Because, I mean, obviously, you watch these games. I mean, they're pretty physical games when they're playing Calgary. So I think if they can end it here, that'd be a huge plus. Speaking of, ending series, if you look around in the Western Conference, if you haven't been paying attention, the Minnesota Wild are down 3-0 against the Blues, and Nashville is beating Chicago 3-0. So you look at these two series, Eddie. I'm not really surprised about Minnesota. We talked about Boudreau and how Minnesota fans love him and think he's the greatest. I'm sure now maybe they're realizing that he's not so much the greatest, as they're down 3-0. Not that they can't come back, but pretty sure that they're going to get knocked out. As far as Nashville and Chicago, this one was a little bit more of a surprise to me. Not that Nashville couldn't compete, but to have them up 3-0 was really a surprise, Eddie. What do you think about these other two series in the Western Conference?
Yeah, I think in the St. Louis-Minnesota one, it's a result of a team that was underwhelming all season, pretty much, in the Blues, who had some strong play late going into the playoffs, which is always good. Obviously, we've seen it with the Ducks and the way they played going into the playoffs and how it's turned out in this series, but I think the play of Jake Allen has been unbelievable for the St. Louis Blues. I mean, he's arguably won them each of the first 3 games here, and I think Minnesota just hasn't been able to get it going. I mean, they've had their chances. They tied it late in one game and then ended up losing it overtime. It just seems to be a trend with Minnesota. No matter who's behind the bench in the playoffs, they always seem to just not be able to get it going in the playoffs. So they had a great regular season this year. They kind of limped into the playoffs. Dubnyk's play dipped down from how great he was early in the season, and I think that's carried over here into the playoffs. So I'm a little bit surprised it's 3-0. I did think St. Louis was gonna be able to eliminate the Wild. I'm surprised they're up 3-0. And then you move over to the Nashville series. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I had Chicago winning in 7. I thought Nashville would give them a run for their money. I just thought that the core and the experience that the Blackhawks have was going to be too much. And it's unbelievable what Nashville's actually been able to do. I mean, they dominated them in the first 2 games. Chicago didn't score a goal until the second period in Game 3. And they were up 2-0, and Nashville was able to come back and win it in overtime. I mean, this looks like the team that everybody thought was going to win the Western Conference and even possibly challenge for the Stanley Cup this year. The Nashville Predators are here to play, and I mean, I'm glad we don't have to face them in the second round. I feel bad for St. Louis having to face that team in the second round because they look like they're ready to go and make a long run and push for the Stanley Cup Finals this year.
Yeah, they are definitely a dangerous threat on that side. And, I mean, can you imagine the Blackhawks going out in the first round? That's pretty crazy as well. So some things to look up, some shakedowns going on in the Western Conference. If you look over in the Eastern Conference, it's a lot more tighter over there, Eddie. You've got Montreal and New York. They're tied up 2-2. Ottawa's up 2-1 on Boston. Toronto is up 2-1 on Washington. Maybe a surprise to some of you. And then, of course, my other favorite team, the Penguins, they're laying the smackdown on Columbus 3-1. So that one's a little bit more spread out, but pretty tight around the East. Maybe some surprises like I talked about with Toronto and Washington, but a lot up in the air, I would say, more so in the Eastern Conference than the Western Conference.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a little bit of a surprise. I think when you look at the beginning of the playoffs, I think the tighter matchups on paper look to be in the West. Yet three of the matchups, teams are up 3-0. They could go for the sweep in that one, which is surprising. That the only team that could have swept in the Eastern Conference was the matchup I thought might have been the closest in the Penguins and the Blue Jackets. Obviously, the Blue Jackets won Game 4. But it's a long battle for them to get back and win Game 7. That's going to be a tough one for them. But yeah, I think the most surprising one is the Leafs leading Washington 2-1. I mean, they've just played unbelievable. It's not even really that Washington has played that bad. It's just the Leafs have come out to play and they've stepped up their game and they're playing at a level that we haven't really seen them play during the regular season. I mean, they were great during the regular season, but to be up 2-1 on a team that everybody pretty much everybody probably had making the East, the Stanley Cup final, if not winning the cup. It's a big surprise. Great for obviously Freddie Anderson and for him to have a solid series so far, and it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it out and end up winning this. I know they have Game 4 tonight in Toronto, and if they can take a 3-1 lead, that's going to be difficult, even for a team of the caliber of the Washington Capitals to come back and win 3 games in a row. And then you look at the other two in the Atlantic, you've got Ottawa leading Boston. I think that's a bit surprising. I think Erik Karlsson's been a horse for them, and he's been a real driving force in them leading. And then Carey Price and Henrik Lundqvist. It's almost an exciting series, but it's a boring series at the same time because you've got two of the league's best goaltenders going head to head. It's a low-scoring game, a lot of chances, but nothing's really happening because you've got two of the best goalies in the world going head to head. So. Not surprised that one's tied at 2. I think that one probably goes 7 games, and it's going to be a goal probably off somebody's butt in overtime. That's going to decide it with the way these two guys are playing right now.
Oh man, yeah, and that's the way it's been in this Duck series. There's been some crazy bounces in these games. They've gone that way for Anaheim. They're looking good. Hopefully, go for the sweep. Take out Calgary, get rested up. Let Edmonton and San Jose beat each other up, and that would be great for the Ducks. So we'll see what happens. Like you said, tonight, if you're in the area, we will have another watch party. We'll be at El Ranchito in Orange. We'll be giving away stuff as well. We also have a new shirt out. It's the "We Are All Josh Manson" shirt. If you haven't seen it, check it out on tpnhockey.com. Only making a limited amount. They're going pretty quick. So if you want to get that shirt, check it out on the website there. It also comes in female sizes as well, the V-necks, all the super soft, material like everybody likes that some of these other T-shirt companies make as well. So we finally made another shirt. We have a couple other designs that we may throw out there too, depending on what happens in this series and who the Ducks play and whatnot. So look for that as well. And, Eddie and I will be back with another show. Just really depends on what happens in the playoffs here with the Ducks in Calgary. And maybe this coming weekend, or maybe we'll, do it right before they hopefully go into the second round. So with that, we appreciate all the fan questions, and we'll see you in a week or so. Let's go Ducks.